Welcome back to One American News. This week has been filled with major headlines in the U.S. and around the world. Here's more in our Week in Review.
The week kicks off at the White House with a prison reform summit.
And the First Step Act proves that really, beyond almost anything we can think of, our country can achieve amazing breakthroughs when we put politics aside and put the interests of all Americans first.
Also on Monday, attorney Michael Avenatti makes his first court appearance in California for fraud and embezzlement charges.
I am highly confident that when the process plays out, that justice will be done.
Tuesday, President Trump welcomes the NATO general to the White House. Plus, history is made in Chicago.
We had faith, an abiding faith in this city, its people, and in its future.
Political outsider Lori Lightfoot becomes the first African-American woman and openly gay person elected as the city's mayor. Also on Tuesday, a U.S. citizen is kidnapped at gunpoint while on tour of a national park in Uganda and held for ransom. Midweek, in Virginia, Democrat Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax calls for an investigation into 2 sexual assault claims against him.
Therefore, at my direction, my attorney has contacted the district attorney's office in Boston, Massachusetts, and the district attorney's office in Durham, North Carolina.
Meanwhile, college admissions scandal. In Boston, actresses Felicity Huffman and Lori Loughlin appear for a federal judge for the first time for their alleged roles in the scheme. Plus, Joe Biden addresses allegations of unwanted touching.
I will be more mindful and respectful of people's personal space.
Moving on to Thursday.
And President Trump is ramping up pressure on Mexico, now warning that the U.S. will impose auto tariffs on the country if it does not help more to stem the flow of illegal immigration.
Plus, President Trump recommends former GOP presidential candidate Herman Cain for a seat on the Federal Reserve Board, while in Chicago, Jussie Smollett faces a civil lawsuit after refusing to pay the city $130,000 in costs to investigate his alleged hoax. And an unsolved FBI case. The young man who claimed to be missing Illinois boy Timothy Pitson turns out to be an imposter and felon. And in California on Thursday, the man charged with the murder of rapper Nipsey Hussle pleads not guilty. Finally, on Friday, President Trump touches down in El Centro, California to meet with law enforcement and tour what he has claimed to be the first section of his border wall. And the week wraps up with the jobs report showing the U.S. added 196,000 new jobs in March. Rachel Alcenas, One American News.
Want to see more videos like this? Click on the link below and subscribe to One American News on YouTube, and call your cable provider and kindly demand that One American News is added to your lineup. Call and subscribe today.
What the mainstream media was too afraid to tell you about the news this week. This week, while the mainstream media obsessed over handsy Joe Biden, here are the things that happened that really matter. Former Obama Department of Homeland Security Secretary Jeh Johnson said what is happening at the border is a crisis. Johnson said Border Patrol, under his control, was overwhelmed by 1,000 apprehensions a day. Now, the Border Patrol is dealing with 4,000 apprehensions a day, 100,000 every month. And Johnson said, quote, by any measure, 4,000 apprehensions on our southern border in one day, 100,000 in a month is a crisis. But did the mainstream media report on this? Did the mainstream media ask why the Democrats keep calling it a fake emergency when even Obama administration officials admit it is a crisis? Nope, the mainstream media didn't say a word. The New York Times and the Washington Post published fake news this week. The New York Times headline reads, some on Mueller's team say the report was more damaging than Barr revealed. The articles insinuated that Attorney General Barr lied in his summary of the Mueller report, and that Mueller team members were calling him out. Except, when you read the articles, neither outlet actually talked to Mueller's team. They used basically a third-degree anonymous source. The article doesn't even anonymously quote Mueller's team itself. They quote a person familiar with an associate who heard from a Mueller team member. But did the mainstream media call out their own for absolutely embarrassing reporting? Nope. The mainstream media acted like this was a smoking gun, proving a cover-up of evidence that Trump is guilty. Pathetic. In the wake of the handsy Joe Biden stories, Democrats claim the other moderate candidate in the Democratic primary race is Pete Buttigieg. Buttigieg is a moderate, they tell us. But Buttigieg supports late-term abortion, abolishing the Electoral College, government-run healthcare, reparations for slavery, amnesty for illegals, soda bans, taxing the rich, and stacking the Supreme Court. That is not moderate, that's radical. But did the mainstream media report to you Buttigieg's radical positions on these issues? No. The mainstream media is going along with the left, using the same tactic the left used to elevate Obama, whom they claimed was a moderate too, even though he was a radical. Judge Brian Hagedorn won the Supreme Court election in Wisconsin against a very liberal opponent, despite nasty attacks on his religion from the left. The left accused him of being anti-gay because he serves on the board of a Christian school that teaches traditional Christian doctrine on natural marriage and sexual morality. And because of a blog post Hagedorn wrote in law school analyzing Justice Scalia's Supreme Court ruling on illegalizing sodomy. For this, the left said his Christian beliefs make him unfit for the judiciary. But Hagedorn won. After all the money the left spent, despite all these attacks, despite the religious bigotry from the left, Hagedorn won. Religious freedom won. But did the mainstream media report on this? No, they didn't, because the mainstream media is in the pocket of the left, and this is the next strategy of the left: stopping political opponents by attacking their Christian religious beliefs. Venezuela is facing 30 days of electricity rationing. They barely have any internet. Millions of Venezuelans are without water. Inflation is at 2.69 million %. 3 million people have fled the country. There is starvation and lack of medicine. Life expectancy has dropped by 3 years. Babies are dying in hospitals. The dictator Maduro blocked humanitarian aid. He threatened the baby daughter and the grandmother of opposition leader Juan Guaido and tried to strip Guaido of his parliamentary immunity. And still, none of the Democratic 2020 presidential contenders will condemn the socialism that has led to the destruction of Venezuela. But did the mainstream media report on this silence from the left, since the left is also touting socialism to bring here to the United States? Nope. The mainstream media won't say a word. The mainstream media doesn't care to report any of that to you, so we will. And that is my final point. Tonight's tipping points: celebrities threaten to boycott the state of Georgia over Georgia's heartbeat bill. So we're going to debunk the liberal lies about this and tell you the truth about the bill tonight. Then a former gang leader joins us on the show to talk about immigration, gangs, and the crisis at the border. Plus, the 5 stories the mainstream media refused to report to you this week. I'm Liz Wheeler. Join me on Tipping Point at 9 o'clock Eastern.
Social media platforms continue to feel ramped up pressure to control content. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg calls on the government to do more to classify and control political speech. One America's Ryan Gerdusky has more from New York.
During a conversation about what Facebook was doing to prevent foreign actors from being able to interfere in the upcoming 2020 election, CEO Mark Zuckerberg told ABC's George Stephanopoulos that he hopes the government will create guidelines about what topics could be considered divisive political speech. These new speech codes would help Facebook regulate what people can post on social media. Zuckerberg said that Facebook has done more to regulate political content since the 2016 election, but the Facebook CEO insisted that the government's current regulations over what could be considered political speech is outdated because they're mostly centered around candidates and campaigns. He said foreign actors, including Russia, bought Facebook advertisements about issues like immigration to rile people up and cause chaos. He said the solution would be for the government to create whole topics that could be considered political speech. These new guidelines would help social media sites stop users from speaking about broad issues in an effort to protect our election. Critics, however, are saying that this is just a method to get around the First Amendment.
What Zuckerberg is saying is that you'd have some sort of government agency categorizing speech, hate speech and political speech and other types of speech. And then you have Facebook and other social networks using those categories to decide what they censor and filter. So on the one hand, you'd have a government agency saying, well, we're just making categories, we're not banning things. And then you'd have a company like Facebook saying, well, we're just a private company. We have the right to ban whatever we want. So it's really a perfect system that Zuckerberg is envisaging there for getting around the First Amendment and censoring millions of Americans.
This is Ryan Gerdusky, One America News, New York.
Want to see more videos like this? Click on the link below and subscribe to One America News on YouTube. And call your cable provider and kindly demand that One America News is added to your lineup. Call and subscribe today.
Tensions between the U.S. and Turkey flare up at the recent meeting of NATO foreign ministers over a Turkish-Russian missile deal. Here's One America's Christian Rose.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo urges Turkey to reaffirm its commitment to NATO amid elevated concerns over the country's relations with Russia. Speaking at a NATO meeting in Washington Thursday, Pompeo endorsed earlier comments from Vice President Mike Pence, criticizing a controversial purchase of Russian air defense systems S-400 by NATO member Turkey.
I think the Turkish government understands the American position quite clearly. I think I heard the Vice President speak to that yesterday as well. Our position hasn't changed. I'm very confident we'll find a path forward.
The Turkish-Russian missile deal, along with their tight cooperation in Syria, raised questions over Ankara's role within the alliance. Earlier this week, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said the S-400 purchase did not violate the rules, but could be problematic amid tensions between NATO and Russia.
It is a national decision what kind of systems different NATO allies procure, but we fully realize that this is now a challenge.
While Pompeo subsequently sought to ease tensions, Ankara responded with anger, saying it's free to choose security partners as it sees fit. In a news conference following that NATO meeting, the Turkish foreign minister rejected Pompeo's remarks, saying the S-400 purchase from Russia can't be cancelled. He stressed Ankara's cooperation with Russia is not an alternative to NATO.
We have already purchased that. We have already purchased. It's a done deal. Any country in our region actually has no other options but should balance its relations with everybody in the region.
The problem is NATO member Turkey appears to disagree with the alliance's stance on Russia, which sees the Kremlin as a geostrategic opponent. NATO also sees military cooperation between its members and third-party countries as potentially compromising its military secrets. Meanwhile, another NATO member, Italy, has recently joined the Belt and Road Investment Programme, led by China. The US and EU see that initiative as a potential threat as well, calling it yuan diplomacy, which means China could use predatory lending to buy political influence and sensitive technology in Italy.
Now it's our duty to adapt to the challenges like radical Islamic terrorism, cyber attacks, uncontrolled migration, Chinese strategic competition.
Secretary Pompeo also addressed US-Russian relations in a broader context, urging the Kremlin yet again to abandon its support for the Maduro regime in Venezuela. This comes just days after the Kremlin deployed at least 100 military personnel to Caracas amid a deepening political crisis.
We did talk about Venezuela. The American position was made clear by President Trump. They need to leave.
These latest developments suggest, despite the statements of unity and commitment from NATO officials, the alliance may be facing internal challenges. It remains to be seen if NATO will prove capable to adapt to the new threats of hybrid warfare, selective political terror, and cyber attacks. Christian Rose, One American News.
Want to see more videos like this? Click on the link below and subscribe to One American News on YouTube, and call your cable provider and kindly demand that One American News is added to your lineup. Call and subscribe today.